And so for me, when it comes to education with kids, it's hands-on. And I find that when a kid touches something, they light up, and when they light up, they learn. And for me, it's the only way I can explain learning for me was by being excited enough to want to know and learn more about it. That's how I became a fisherman.
Welcome to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg.
We are live from Laguna Beach in the Ben Reinberg I Own It studios today. And we have a very special guest in studio that I'm really excited to talk to. He's a dear friend, and he's really a celebrity if you ever have lunch with him. He gets hounded by a lot of women and kids and men that just want a photo with him. Jay Brewer, welcome to the show. It's so good to see you, and thank you for coming to Laguna Beach and joining us today.
Well, it isn't like coming to Laguna Beach is suffering.
No, it's
it's
not.
a beautiful place.
It sure is. Let's kick things off. So, can you share a bit about how you approach your relationship with animals? Like when you were a kid, what kind of animals did you love most?
Well, actually, when I was a kid, I didn't have a lot. And so I would go out and flip boards and catch frogs and lizards and snakes. And so I kind of got a relationship going with them, liking animals in general, just, having them as pets. And I used to just like go in irrigation ditches in the middle of the night and stay out there half the night. Didn't work very well for my schooling. But then again, schooling just wasn't my thing for whatever reason. I just didn't do well in school. It was, it was torturous for me. And I didn't fit in that mold, that you would, I just wasn't that guy. And I never knew that in the long run it would work out okay, but I just knew that I couldn't fit in it. Even if later in life I tried and I just couldn't fit in that mold.
Were there certain pets you had as a kid that you gravitated to?
Well, I think everybody gravitates to pets to some degree if they had the experience. I mean, who hasn't had the dog when you're a little kid that you looked at, you held the dog and cried about something that you thought mom and dad didn't understand or life wasn't fair, but the dog understood. Or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So, I think people in general have a special relationship with animals. I mean, I've had kids with autism, and they come in and they just, all of a sudden their parents are like, oh my gosh, they watch their kid start reacting in ways that they hardly ever see. So animals are used a lot in a lot of ways for people. There's so many types of pets and they're used in so many different ways for, relationships, honestly, with people and humans. And I think it's a special bond that people can have with animals.
So what is it about reptiles that made it your life's work? Like what intrigues you about it?
So I think it's because that was just, you can't go out behind your yard and catch a wild animal and make it your pet, especially if you live in California. I lived in Tustin, and my mom had passed away when I was 4, and we were financially, destitute in real life. And so for me, I had a lack of things to play with, and my friends, if they were busy and I wasn't playing with their stuff, then I was out trying to find my own stuff. And that's how I got into the reptile part of it, because it was more snakes and lizards and frogs. Even they're amphibians, they're still kind of that hops, crawls, or gives your mom the chills kind of thing. It's that's one of our little slogans as a joke, we probably have it at the reptile zoo. It does one of those things. So that's kind of how I started. But, in real life, if you really want to go back to animals in general, it's going to be my dog. You know what I mean?
Right.
And, but I had a dog up till recently. I've never not had one, but I've just been really gone a long ways with reptiles. And I think the fact that people are always so scared of them intrigues me. And it's fun to teach people that that fear isn't really, the old saying, false evidence appearing real. That's the acronym for fear. And I think that in life, I've learned to face a lot of fears in my life. And so I think watching other people face their fears, even with animals and reptiles in general, is sometimes awesome. And of course, one of the things that motivates me pretty heavy is how much animals influence my life. And to watch little kids that maybe don't fit into society just right, and plenty of them don't, that they can find out that, look at me, I can do it. I did it, and everybody told me I'd be a failure and I could never do anything, and I was going to amount to nothing, and I'll be lucky if I could ever. Those are just common common things that I heard on a regular basis, and they were probably all right, but they forgot that that was for them and not for me.
Well, that's what's so amazing is that you could take those comments and say, you know what, that's not me. I'm going to be successful.
Yeah.
And it just shows. I mean, when we're out together and you see people gravitate to you, it's real.
It's kind of amazing.
It's just a representation of the kind of person you are and the character of yourself. And that's what's so incredible about you and why people want to take photos with you and spend time with you. So many animals are really dangerous. Okay.
Absolutely.
And I believe you had a few close calls as well, including a large constrictor. How do you approach safety with your dangerous animals? Because you touch a lot of animals and you show that on your videos and your Instagram.
I think that 75 or 80% of what I'm touching that everybody thinks is so dangerous isn't. You know, like they see me. One of the most catchy things that I do is I remove eggs from a female snake that has laid its eggs, and it's actually one of the passions that kind of got me through a lot of bad times in life, because it was like, you know, when you're having a bad month or a bad week or a bad day, but you're working on a project that you've been working on for 10 years and you're still 10 years away from seeing an end to it, maybe, it kind of gives you the ability to look past your moment. And so I think that motivated me a lot. And so these eggs, when I'm taking them away, the snakes are striking at me and everybody's like, oh, he's going to die. And the truth of the matter is I'd be way worse jumping on a motorcycle and going to LA. I mean, when you get in an accident on a motorcycle, you got like, I forget what the statistics, but it's crazy odds that it's going to be fatal. You know what I mean? It's really high. And I know that with my friends that have been in motorcycle accidents that I wish were still here, you know, because they aren't here for motorcycle accidents.
Right.
That death is real with that. And a snake biting me, when it's a non-venomous snake, I don't care if it's 300 pounds, it's going to maybe give me stitches. That being said, I've only had stitches once, and that was from a surgery to fix a bite. And the surgery was worse than the bite. You know, it was just that it happened to cut a tendon in my finger, and I had to have surgery. And so it took me, you know, a long time to get over the surgery, more than it would have if I would have maybe ignored it, but my finger wouldn't have pointed normal. And I thought, I got insurance. You know, let them pay the big money to fix my finger.
So share some stories of some dangerous animals you've worked with.
Well, I mean, the most dangerous situation I ever was in, well, not maybe that I was in, what turned out to be the most dangerous situation I ever was in, I was in the hills locally here in California. At this point, I was a commercial fisherman, which was my first occupation.
Right.
After I got orphaned. When I got orphaned at 14, I became a commercial fisherman for a little background. Well, when I was a fisherman, I started having money. All of a sudden, in my mind, I was like, hey, I never got a bit of a childhood. So now with all the money that nobody telling me where I could spend my money, nobody telling me what I could do with my money, and I was working, and I was a very successful fisherman. All of a sudden, I'd go make $1,000 a day, and we ain't talking about $1,000 a day in today's economy. We're talking $5,000 today in today's economy. To have that kind of money when you're 17, 16 years old was kind of astronomical for me, from coming from literally nothing. And so I started buying rare reptiles. Well, I like to go snake hunting. Well, I went snake hunting, and I didn't really want any rattlesnakes, but I'd caught in one rattlesnake, and I was with a guy that liked looking at everything, and I lifted up a piece of steel, and there was 5 rattlesnakes underneath it. And I don't know why, but I was born without fear. I mean, I have a few fears, or should I say I had a few fears, but I faced them. But I lifted up a piece of steel, and there's 5 rattlesnakes, and a little bit of ignorance to go along with that, no fear. And I was like, they all started going every direction, but one of them came right at me. And I didn't want to drop the metal because it had these ribs in it, and I didn't want to kill the rattlesnakes.
Right.
I was like, well, they didn't do nothing wrong. I just want to let them go. And this one decided, you screwed my day up, and I'm going to screw your day up. And I didn't think nothing of it, and it coiled up. I finally, after all the rattlesnakes got out of the way, I flipped it over, and this one was coiled up, ready to strike at me. And I blocked it with my foot, and then I pinned it with my foot. And I had Van tennis shoes that go way down.
Yeah, canvas.
Real low on the side. And that thing, I pinned its head just a little bit off from where I needed to, trying not to hurt it, and it just spun up and stuck me right in the foot. The rattlesnake bit me with one fang, and That was the beginning of a very interesting day. To say, or should I say, a very interesting week. On that week, I was in the newspapers that I was going to die, and it was quite a week of, kind of. I can't go too deep, or we won't have a podcast in the future. No,
So-
we won't have this podcast because it'll be over.
That's right.
So-
I believe you initially got started in the reptile business by breeding snakes.
Yes.
And share more about how do good breeders operate and what kind of snakes have you bred?
Well, most people that breed snakes are doing it because they passionately enjoy snakes. I mean, there's people that come into the industry mostly for money, but they get weeded out really fast because, first of all, it's not as easy as it looks. You got to be skilled. Second of all, there's just like the stock market goes up, goes down. So most of them come in on an up, and then, and then the long haul, it's like, this isn't that financially great. So most of the people who breed snakes are doing it really because they love it. It's not about money. It's about, just watching a baby snake hatch is like, I always tell everybody, man, when you hatch your first snake, it's like as close to a spiritual thing you could get. It's like having your kids. I mean, I know that sounds kind of crazy, but you're nurturing this little, you're going through this whole process, try to be successful. Then the snake lays the egg, and, and some snakes have live birth, but, you got this egg to work with, and now all of a sudden you got to incubate it just right, and all of a sudden this baby's coming out of it, and you realize, wow, I just had a big part of this thing ever happening. And because you had to feed the snake a certain way, temperatures a certain way, everything's got to be perfect. So when you find this little baby starting to hatch, and you get it out, and then you got to get it to eat, and it's just, you get really involved, and you'll find in life anything you put a lot of effort into, you naturally fall in love with. It doesn't matter what it is.
What are the economics for a snake breeding business?
I've never made a lot of money snake breeding, to be completely honest. I've had my moments where, I've had these incredible years that's what saved my company. And then I've had years where it was just a burden, but it was the burden that I wanted to carry. I mean, I've had conversations with my daughters like, she's more obviously being a younger version. She not only did she get to go to school, not only was she good in school, but she was really good at economics on top of it. And she would say, like, and I always used to say, oh, if I had somebody to come here and keep control, if anybody could control me,
right,
we'd make a lot of money. And we'd have that conversation, and she'd say, that the snake breeding would come on the chopping block. And I go, but that's forbidden.
That's right.
And I'm like, you tell me we don't even need to talk about that portion of the business, because that's like my fuel. You know what I mean? It's like, selling real estate, or like what you maybe do, there's got to be a part of that is actually the fuel of it. It isn't, I kind of doubt it's the money,
right? Just
because most people that are successful in business, there's a passion about a portion of it.
That's right.
And for me, the snake breeding was look, I love doing this. People love seeing the babies. I get to make things that have never been seen on the planet Earth ever before, over and over and over. So it's an exciting chase. So I used to tell her, you just tell me how much we have to make so I can keep my project, and we'll figure out how to develop something else. So I think behind every dream is a lot of work and a lot of time you're going to have to put in it, where you're going to be unsuccessful with your dream, which means that you need to figure out a way to go fund your dream, right? Today we call it, everybody wants to fund their dream with somebody else's money.
Right.
And it sounds good and it works once in a while, but there's still nothing like funding your own dream.
Well, that's how I got started in commercial real estate. I mean, we own and manage commercial real estate around the United States. And your point is so well taken, because one, I had a dream. You have to work hard. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to fail, which is okay. It's when you fail, you get closer to the outcome you want, and you'll learn lessons, which is great. And so one thing I've learned is that what I love about commercial real estate, to touch on your point, is serving others. In my business, you get to serve a lot of people. You deal with a lot of resources. You have employees, you have investors. And so you're looking to serve others to help them build wealth, teach them, help them create their own wealth. One of my missions is my leadership team to all be millionaires, multimillionaires before they leave me. And so that's how I serve people. And that's what I enjoy about my business. It's really such a people-oriented business, commercial real estate. It's what I love about what I do, because that's what fulfills me. Making money is great, But one thing I've learned
Yeah,
is
but money doesn't.
it doesn't answer. It doesn't solve problems.
It creates a lot of them.
It does. It can. That's absolutely correct. But what I've learned is that when I serve people and I impact them and help them, whether it's investors, employees, lenders, whoever we're dealing with, the money seems to just keep following me. It attracts that behavior.
I think that
it's really interesting.
You're on to the basic economics of the universe.
Right. I am. Just call me Mr. Universe.
No, I really believe that's true. I mean, you were talking about how people, we only went to eat out together one time, really, in real life. And when we were there, you gotta see what happens. And to me, how can you get paid better than having somebody that bumps into you on a street, be so excited to see you that they're literally just busting at the seam happy and not feel like you're the richest guy on earth.
Right.
And that, and that being said, I get to spend time with some of the richest people on earth. And it's like, and it's all none of it has to do with economics. I didn't buy my way to the richest house in the, going to some of the wealthiest families in the world. I didn't buy my way to have people come and, smile when they see me, but it's just the reward of providing something that they're enjoying. And so I think that you're having that motivation is maybe not easy to nurture in everybody, but at the end of the day, it's a heck of a business plan.
Oh, there's no question. So after your career as a fisherman, and you touched on it, you got involved with a pet store and then eventually graduated to building the Reptile Zoo, which is now your baby.
Yeah, but you talked about failures, right?
Yeah.
Well, really, the Reptile Zoo is a failure of a pet store because, the economy keeps crashing. And every time, first Gulf War, I had to recreate myself. I started doing more educational schools, and I started getting deeper into breeding instead of it being like the part in the back, it became part in the front.
Right.
And then I just kept, I had to keep evolving. And so the zoo, even though I ran my pet store like a mini zoo, because I decided this advertising thing might be great for some industries, but trying to catch one person out of a million that is going to want to buy a snake or a lizard or a frog is just really fishing in a very big ocean for a specialized fish. And so I knew that all my advertising money was wasted. So I decided very early on, instead of spending $2,000 on an ad, I'm going to go spend $2,000-$3,000 on an animal that people are going to leave and talk about, wow, I was at this pet store and did you see that? And it worked. It worked perfectly for a decade. And then everything fell apart. And then I ended up looking one day and I had no money and I'd borrowed all the money from my homes. And I was just sitting there going, it's over. I can't borrow any more money. The economy's crashed. My place is so full of people that I can't even, it's costing me $200 a day just to sweep up after them and replace the toilet paper they're using. You know what I mean? It sounds funny, but
Absolutely.
When you're on a negative, you got to count things like that.
Right.
And I just said, only option I have is to do something I don't want to do, and that's charge people to come in. And I started polling people. Hey, what do you think about I do this or I go out of business? And everybody's like, you can't go out of business. Here's $200. Here, you can't go out of business. You can't go out of business. And I realized, I guess I got to face my fear of upsetting people, which is one other part of life that you have to learn, and do what you need to do. And I did it. And, bam, here we are.
How many visitors do you get a year at the Reptiles?
This is embarrassing. I don't know.
If you had a ballpark.
Thousands and tens of thousands. I honestly should know that number. And it's changed so much after COVID that I don't even know the numbers anymore. Because after COVID, it actually increased. And some days we have 500 people a day, 600 people a day, which is to me to think that this little tiny, when you think of a zoo, you think of a zoo.
Right,
you get in a
with
car,
the lions,
you got to walk a long
tigers.
ways from the parking lot to get there.
Yep.
I'm in a little strip mall, and somehow I've made this huge impact, and I'm blown away. I call it living the dream, but it's, a lot of my life has been kind of over the top. When I became a fisherman, I started at 14, 15 years old was when I actually started fishing. I built my own boat. And at 16, I was in a full page picture in National Geographics. And so I've had a lot of as much as I've had what most of people would call the most worst experience of a start, I've had these highs that are just like, the only thing I haven't done is win the lottery, and I don't even care. Because I already feel like I won something better than the lottery. No, I won an interesting life that I love. So, I mean? It's, everybody's like, oh, people always talk about going on the internet, and it's not like what it seems. And sure, I got lots of things that aren't perfect. I work hard. Sometimes I'm just so disappointed in how some things go, but I've learned to live through the problems to get to the greatness. It's like, hiking up a hill. Nobody likes them climbing up that mountain, but when you get up the top, the view is incredible.
Oh, there's
no
no
what I mean?
doubt.
But
No
you can't
doubt.
live on the top of the mountain every day. So it's part of the journey, and the journey is amazing.
So you're a tremendous hit on social media, and I've seen
It's
it.
kind of unbelievable.
I've seen it live. I've spent time with you, and we've had a meal together. What kind of videos get the highest view counts for you?
Well, that's why I brought up the snake striking at me.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty darn high, because they're just watching this snake that's like, 150 pounds, striking at me, and it looks like I'm like the best I mean, you name the boxer, and I've been told I could waste him. I mean, just because it's like some of the times I've once in a while I get it on the chin, but it's rare, and it's always kind of amazing how it looks, and so that's way up there. I always dream about the educational ones, but being good. But the algorithm they don't show they don't show the educational amazing moments.
Right.
So I just try to get as much of that in as I can, because that's really my passion, is to teach people about animals and reptiles. But when I started, it seemed like everybody just thought snakes, snake, shovel, grab the shovel, you know what I mean?
Right.
And now people are like, instead I get messages like, this guy was going to kill it, I stopped him. You know what I mean?
Right.
I thought you'd be proud of me. And I think, awesome, you got the idea. Just leave them alone. It's like people, you know what? We're all different, and we're all fine until we start trying to control another person. Nobody wants to be controlled. No more than a snake wants to be yanked out of the wild. You know what I mean? And it's not that the snake's scared of being out of the wild. It's just scared of being eaten, because everything in the wild's trying to kill each other.
Exactly.
And it's either food or not be food, And so I just think that a lot of times we just need to, in life in general, just like, hey, we don't have to agree. You're a good guy, I'm a good guy. Let's just leave it at that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
What type of videos do you like? Obviously, the snake babies and the snake bites seem to be very popular.
Snake strikes.
Right.
But I also have a lot of amazing things where I'm walking with a big tiger. You know what I mean? And people are like, how can you do that? Well,
right.
There's a lot of falsehoods in life. You know what I mean? That we're constantly living in a world that we think everything is a certain way. And life is way more of a bigger picture than we sometimes can paint it in our little minds.
So is there certain videos that you like creating over others?
I love getting out, and being around. For whatever reason, I love giant animals. I mean, my snakes aren't just snakes. My snakes are the biggest snakes in the world. When I go visit people, very commonly I'm visiting one of the largest crocodiles in the world, or some giant lion or tiger that, I love hippos. The idea of taking a hippo and picking up this giant, and hippos are probably the most dangerous thing I'd ever be around, but I don't walk out and like pet them,
right,
because they're the most dangerous thing in the world. I got to use some now you're doing stunts on a freeway on a motorcycle. You know what I mean? I actually calculate my risk, and a lot of things I do in my life look really scary, but I guarantee you I'm the last person that wants to do something stupid. And doesn't mean stupid things can't come out of things that you're doing that look stupid. Sometimes I get bit, sometimes things go wrong, and sometimes there's no room for something to go wrong. And when you're standing next to, like, say, a 2,000-pound crocodile that could definitely eat you, that video is going to do well. Especially if it's in the middle of eating a leg of a pig, and you realize, whoa, and it's fast and it can knock you down with its tail. So those kind of videos in general do really well. But people like going on adventures too. I might go to Florida and look for snakes at night and visit somebody during the day. People like adventure. People like seeing different places, different animals, different experiences. We all, sometimes we got to try to live vicariously through other people. So I think a lot of people get a face their fear by watching me.
Oh, there's no doubt about
Yeah, and,
that.
and they'll message me. I used to be scared of snakes, but now that I've, people, that's funny because, I got people that are in reptiles and they think I'm ruining like their whole future.
Uh-huh.
And then but then I have millions of followers, and the number one things they're saying is like, I'm not scared of snakes anymore. Because I realize if you're doing stuff I'd never do, so why would I be scared if you're fine with that? And, I have to remind them, hey, just remember, they're venomous snakes. Like 30% of the snakes are venomous, so 20 or 30%. And the rest of them aren't venomous, but we run around thinking they're all venomous and they're all dangerous. And so there's a lot of misconceptions in life, and even in real estate. And, you got to be a billionaire to buy something. You know what I mean?
Right.
You don't have to be a billionaire.
You don't. You can use other.
You got to live
people's money.
somewhere, right?
You do. You have to live somewhere, and you can structure deals all different types of ways, which I've
Correct.
done in my career. So your zoo programs and videos place a lot of emphasis on education. I like your education ones. Do you enjoy teaching others about reptiles? And when working with children, what's your philosophy for ensuring that learning is fun for them?
So for me, I learned nothing.
Uh-huh.
And now I'm literally, we got a kids camp, right?
Uh-huh.
And I'm just so excited. It's so amazing to me that this kid that couldn't learn anything, that doesn't even, I like to say I've got a 6th grade education, even though I made it to 9th grade.
Uh-huh.
I never graduated high school. I never, you're talking about every learning disability you could probably have, short of blindness and being blind and not having hearing. I'm serious. I'm that guy. I just was never able to learn. I had no attention span. I had no interest in most of the learning.
Uh-huh.
So for me, what I really got intrigued with when I was young was anything I can immerse myself in and touch and feel and work on. So like I used to be, like I built a boat at 14 years old. Who's built a boat at 14 years old, right?
I don't know a lot of people that
You
have.
get my point.
Yeah,
and then I
absolutely.
took the boat and created a business out of it and took my boat out 50 miles. It's just unheard of stuff. And it wasn't like I had this super mentor teaching me. It was just that I was so intrigued with fishing and boats that I learned. It was hands-on, and I could just, if I touched it, I could do it. You know what I mean? And so for me, the first thing I want everything at my zoo to be is hands-on. Without hands-on, a couple times we had a few run-ins with the city and the state, and they talked about the hands-on aspect, like it needed to be removed. And I was just like, you're going to have to take me out in this one. I'm going to fight you. I'm going to fight. I'm like, there's a lot of things I could deal with, a lot of changes. I'm the king of being able to deal with a change. You throw a problem at me and I just think, oh, problem just means we need to change something. It doesn't mean we have to give up. And it doesn't matter how big it is. It doesn't matter if you come in with that intention that this problem is going to close you down. My intention is I'm going to figure out what in your plan of closing me down is actually the real problem, so we can focus on that, because closing me down is not an option. And so for me, when it comes to education with kids, it's hands-on. And I find that when a kid touches something, they light up, and when they light up, they learn. And for me, it's the only way I can explain learning for me was by being excited enough to want to know and learn more about it. That's how I became a fisherman. I was literally, the first day I ever went fishing as a business, took my boat out for fishing, I literally caught one of the best catches that anybody had seen at the Newport Dory fleet in 5 years. And it was because I talked to old guys and they told me about this spot. Oh, you just run your boat. It was out this way, about this far, about in this depth. And so I literally got and, measured everything out on a map, took all everybody's information and went and refound a spot that nobody had fished for years. It was called the Dago Bank. This was its old name in the 50s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I literally went and found this place called the Dago Bank and caught this incredible fish. And one of the number one critics was an Italian guy, and I was only 15, right? And so he was making fun of me being. There was a guy named Uncle Louie that turned into being like my mentor, like my father eventually, and he had a bunch of nephews, and so he would call us the Diaper Brigade.
Oh.
And so it was and with 3 weeks into fishing, this 30-year veteran fisherman was following me to my spot. And I thought,
Isn't that interesting how that works?
it's like, you know what? it's the first thing of living the dream is you cannot listen to the haters.
That's right.
The haters they just don't have a dream. They just, if they had a dream, they don't have time to hate on you.
Well, a lot of people in that situation they're jealous because you're doing something they would like to do.
Well, the funny part
or
is,
they don't have the guts to do it.
And it takes a lot of guts to do anything in life that's going to be big, because
Exactly.
it never looks like it's going to work.
Exactly.
It never makes any sense.
Correct.
And it just takes the deep down and like, you got to look at things more like, if I want to get to the moon, maybe I got to stop, if I want to get to Mars, I got to stop at the moon. You know what I mean? And you just got to find a way to get each grip to get towards where you want to go. I just, for whatever reason, nothing's ever been unobtainable in my mind. At times when I got a little bit older, I started putting myself in, I like to think of life as like when you're a kid, you think you can do anything. You put on a Superman outfit. You want to ride a motorcycle, and you're 5 years old, right? And then before you know it, the world had a tendency of beating you down and into submission, and it'll start making you believe that only special people can do these special things. And for whatever reason, one of my worst things about me was I was a nightmare kid, and I had a chip on my shoulder. And so that chip on my shoulder was my weakness as a kid, but it became my strength. Because the same chip, when people would tell me, you can't do it, I thought, you can't do it, but I will. And so that chip became my strength, but I had to learn how to tame that chip into actually working for me instead of against me.
It's interesting because you have no fear of animals, okay? And that has to correlate to business, I would think, and living your life. Like, well, if I'm not afraid of this, why would I ever be afraid of failure? Why would I be afraid of hiring new employees? Why would I be afraid of if someone criticizes me, what I do for a living?
Now you're talking about the core of a person.
Yeah, but the
core
core of you is you're fearless. That's who you are.
Not that this is a topic we're going to talk about.
Right.
But my biggest fear in life was when I finally had my own family. Me and my wife were going through a divorce.
Right.
And you want to talk about core fear. Now you're talking about, we found Jay's magic weakness.
His Achilles heel.
Right. You know what I mean? And
his kryptonite.
I told my wife more than once, your kryptonite, I always used to tell her, you don't understand. You can control the world. You know what I mean? Like, you're the thing that matters the most to me. And of course she doesn't, she's like, well, if you did, then why this, And that's like 10 podcasts.
Right.
But the point of
we'll
life
get into
is,
that in the next one.
In every single person sitting watching this show, they have a fear in their life.
Absolutely.
I don't care if they're a billionaire. I don't care if they have control over a nation. There's something that they have a weakness on, and they're protecting it with the most protection you can imagine. So I've had people actually tell me that, like, they weighed 350 pounds. They're, 400. Actually, I think it was like 500 pounds. Sitting on a couch watching one of my shows, and decided that, hey, if I could have if I have fears, what if I faced one of my fears? And he basically went out somewhere else, not with me, touched a snake, one of his fears, and it was the first fear he broke ever in his life. And then he made a whole little video how that one fear made him look in the mirror and say, you're sitting in that chair and you weigh 500 pounds. Deal with it. And the guy's like, 200 pounds now, took over his whole life. And he basically says, and I just sit there going, wow, how can some guy in some pet store in California have that cool of an impact on somebody's life? And so that's motivated me a lot of times. It seems like some of the times when I was this close to out of business, somebody would come in and tell me how I impacted their life. And you talk about helping people.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes me, it kind of chokes me up because it's like, wow. I mean, that's the kind of impact I want to have on the world. Who cares? I love animals.
Right.
But animals don't, with having no family and coming from a really tough background, those kind of things move me and motivate me to, like, not give up. And so I've been through a couple times where I should have never made it out of business and never made it to the next week. But those people walked in on that day and I went, I don't care. I could do this. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go beyond. I'm gonna go so far beyond bankruptcy. It's ridiculous, and I'm gonna lean into it. And I'm gonna find a way out. And then, you know, I've had it happen multiple times in my life.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So for you, Jay, what does a day in the life look like now that you've evolved to become who you are? And so you manage the zoo, you're taking a lot of videos. What else? Like what's next? Like where are you going with all this? That's what people want to know. And what are you most excited about when you wake up in the morning?
You know, I'm in a very unique part of my life right now. I've got a TV show that's going to break any minute. I've got all this stuff going on. But at the same time, I'm like, where am I really going to go from here? And it's like, you know, I wanted a TV show literally so I could write a book, which I already wrote, I decided one day I'm just going to write the book. And I wrote the book. And then COVID hit, so I haven't published it. And now and so it was so weird because it's like I took steps that I thought had to be in a certain order, and I took them out of order just by almost out of frustration. Like I want to have a book, but I really want to have this big ending because you have to have a big ending or nobody's going to care. You know what I mean? In your mind, you're thinking it's the big ending, but really you realize it's the journey. But you don't always realize it till you actually finish your journey. And I say finish very loosely because I know there's more to come. But you know, you may have, I always say live in the dream. And living the dream, the definition, just so people understand, is that I ended up in places so far beyond what I could have dreamed. I could have never dreamt them. You know, Orphan can't dream about having, you know, 60 million followers with your daughter. I mean, how does an orphan dream something like that when he can't even, you know, dream about having a clean house to live in, or you know, you just can't do it. You know what I mean? So sometimes we have to get to the one hill to get to the next hill to get to the next hill. And so living the dream to me is that I'm awake and I'm standing in my dream going, holy cow, how did I get here? And so for me right now, I'm in one of these holy cow moments wondering, wow, what am I supposed to do? So I want to finish my book. And I say finish it because now the stories just keep happening to now it's like I've got all the home runs. And then one of the other reasons why I wanted to have a show was because I wanted to do motivational speaking. And like 6 months ago, a year ago, I was just sitting there realizing, why do you need a show? You know what I mean? You don't need a show.
Right.
You're becoming so famous. Just start working on it. And so I'd done a tiny bit of it. And then I met Greg Reed, and I realized, I didn't meet you by accident. It's time for me to double down on this. And then it seemed like the next week, all of a sudden, a show lead came in, and you know, it took me almost 12 months to close the lead, but which I'd been there 3 times almost getting a show. And so I was just sitting there back to that same place going, what are you waiting on? Quit waiting on something. There's something in everybody's future you're waiting on.
Yep.
Get over it.
Right.
Quit waiting on it.
Take action.
Just take action. You know, I'm not telling people to go risk it all.
Right.
Instead, I'm telling people to go do what you have to do to pay your way. I don't care if it's something you hate. I don't care if you got to scrub toilets. Do it as good as you can. Become the best at it, and dream about something else and start working on the side on that. But make sure you do whatever you do right, so you don't mess that up. And just use as a ladder to get to the next point. I'm sure you don't tell everybody, oh, go take your life savings and go buy an apartment building. You know what I mean? It's like, no, establish what you need to establish first, and then take the steps that you can handle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so,
no, it's so well said.
So I'm in a funny spot, probably like a lot of viewers that are like, what do I do next? I've never hardly been in a place where I haven't seen forward. I'm a little bit in that place right now. You know,
That's
I mean, beyond the show, beyond the book, and beyond trying to figure out how to become a motivational speaker, which I guess is maybe I'm speaking my own destiny. I hope.
I think you're putting it out there.
But I've learned another thing. If you don't put it out there, you'll never find it.
That's right. Yeah, you gotta lay out that outcome. So
you know what Greg Reed says, right?
What's that?
Whatever you're seeking is seeking you.
Exactly.
And there's some truth to that.
There's a lot of truth to that, and I love Greg. There's a lot of ecosystems that are being reduced and destroyed around the world, and you travel a lot now around the world. which is not good for many of the animals that live in the wild. Is this something you spend a lot of time thinking about? And do you think special actions needed in some way to migrate the risks to wild animals?
Uh, I like to believe that we've become self-aware of our environment enough now,
Uh-huh.
and that now we just have to look at logical finishes of what we've decided, and not crazy finishes either. You know what I mean? We still have human beings that have to exist, and we have animals that have to exist. And I think sometimes we get to the point where it's either one or, and I think we have to learn more to coexist. And a lot of animals luckily have been able to figure out a way to coexist. And I think there's some things we can fix, and there's some things we can never fix. And I think we just have to establish where can we do the most with the least. I mean, that's always been one thing I did learn from not having anything, is sometimes you have to look at the best return on investment in more than just money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your time.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have the best of, you can go do the most wildest things in the world with your life, but are you going to really have anything left when you're done with it? Or is it just floundered money, floundered time? You know, trying to get your time where you're getting something out of it is important. And I think when we're working with animals and ecosystems that are still intact, we need to learn how to save them. And there's a lot of ways we can rebuild them in the most precarious spots, like in the middle of cities, parks. I mean, we have a park in the middle, we have a place called Mile Square Park. There's mountain lions in that thing. There's like crazy animals. I mean, I might be wrong, but I was told there was, that there's cougars still there. But I've literally seen, foxes and wolves and, not wolves, but coyotes and like all kinds of animals in there that you would never could believe could have survived being in the middle of the busiest, state in the world. And it's kind of cool. And so I think we need to learn to take those special spots and really actually keep them special. And, so I think that's really important, and we can do that on a bigger scale with it all possible and still maintain, working for making it better for humans too. So
I always want to ask you this. I imagine you get asked sometimes about ethical concerns about caging animals,
Yeah.
and keeping animals out of their natural habitat. I'm sure it comes up frequently.
Oh,
What are the thoughts on this topic, and how do you think about the potential trade-offs?
well, there is trade-off. I mean, without, takes me to like a simple thing, like that movie Blackfish. Some people are gonna be like, "Oh, you're terrible." Nobody cared about whales until SeaWorld built SeaWorld. SeaWorld captured animals. They put them in enclosures. You might wake up in the morning and think how horrible it is, but because of SeaWorld, there's people making a living learning about oceanography, protecting the animals, learning what they needed, learning that they were being slaughtered for this and that, learning what was killing them. They would have never learned, but we got that hands-on situation where people learned about the animals. And I think that the hands-on part of it is a key part. Without the interaction, you don't know enough about them to care about them or to love them. Somebody sitting in LA surely isn't worried about a tiger in India. You know what I mean?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
But all of a sudden, somebody in California sitting in LA that saw a tiger, realized how amazing it is, and then they hear how somebody needs to raise money to protect them because people are doing this, or I should use elephants, they want their ivory, you know what I mean? All of a sudden, the guy in LA has learned enough about an elephant because of an elephant he's seen or touched or seen or interacted with or whatever, that he cared, that he realized how cool that elephant is. It needs to be taken care of. Now, all of a sudden, he's a stockbroker, he makes a bunch of money, and the IRS is going to take half of it anyway, and he thinks, you know what? Half this money's coming from the government. Let's go ahead and donate it to the Elephant Foundation in Africa, where the elephants are truly endangered and impacted, and let's put people to protect them. Well, I think that at the end of the day, animals need to be obviously taken care of correctly. They obviously need to be cared for. And I don't think a lot of people realize, especially in reptiles, that most of the reptiles that people are taking care of are like your cats and dogs. If you take your dog out and let it go back in Africa, he's just going to be food. He's never going to live in Africa again. You know, I mean, your cat's never going to live in Egypt again. You know, or every cat has a different lineage, but you can't. A lot of these animals, I have animals that are 15, 18 generations removed from the wild. They can't go out in the wild.
Right.
And the truth is, they don't want to go out in the wild, no more than you want to go out in the wild. I mean, we go home, right? And people think, oh, these animals should, like, they need all this space. Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of these animals can have all this space and they don't want it. A snake wants to hide in a little spot. You know what I mean? A bird wants to live in a space in a tree. Mm-hmm. Well, we go home and we go in our house, we shut our door, then we go up to our room, and then we get in a bed, and then we crawl underneath the sheets. And you know what we think?
Yeah.
And a lot of animals are very similar. They're not looking, if you go out and look for deer, you don't find them in the hardest spots to climb.
Right.
You find them in the easiest place between their food and their homes. Uh-huh. And they try to stay safe in that because they're always being hunted. And if you go to Africa, where they say the cradle of the world is basically the Africa region. Uh-huh. And you go there and you go lay your head down on a rock or wherever you're going to sleep in the middle of the night. If you were to go back to the wild, you'd realize really quick when you heard the when you heard the lions roaring and the hyenas making their noise, mm-hmm. You'd be looking for the smallest place to hide to be safe. Animals are no different. And so if you give an animal a safe place, and in a lot of cases, animals bond with people. And some people are like, that's not fair. And I think, why is it not fair? Because these animals are not in the wild. So I'm opposed to taking animals out of the wild, except for breeding projects that, I'm all for, if there's 5 rhinos left, mm-hmm. They shouldn't be left in the wild for some poacher to shoot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's horrible to think that we would have to go pull them out of the wild
right.
to save them. But, ideally is to leave them in the wild and protect the heck out of them. And so I'm not opposed to anything to protecting wild animals at all. And I think that you do take on an obligation when you own even a dog or cat, that you need to give that dog or cat or lizard or snake a good life, feed it well. And, but remember, it is a snake and it's not a human. And what you like is different than what it likes. Even though if you stop and sit down and lay in your bed and watch TV and get on your cell phone instead of, and order your pizza instead of walking down the street to go buy your pizza, which would be better for you, you still choose to buy it online and have it delivered to your door. Doesn't make you less of a human any more than the fact that some animals, I have animals that get to the point where an alligator, will want to lay its head in my lap. Uh-huh. Well, that isn't bad. It just isn't normal. Right. You know what I mean? And I'm not suggesting that I'm not even suggesting an alligator should be a pet, because that same alligator is only that way because I used it for educational interactions for 15 years. So it's used to humans. And so being used to a human isn't necessarily a bad thing any more than you being used to sitting on your bed is, because you've found that there's an easier way. There's nothing wrong with an animal finding an easier way than to have its food brought to it and eat it out of a bowl or fetch a bone. Or, and sometimes I have my animals chase their food around the enclosure like a piece of chicken, and they'll swim, and people will be like, you're torturing that animal. The same animal is madly in love with me. Mm-hmm. And it's not because I bring it food, because some of those animals I can hold food up and I can pet them and they will decide I don't want to eat. I'd rather just be petted. And so it's not the food, it's the interaction. And so I think it's really important that the animal is stimulated, has some attention. Mm-hmm. I don't like to ever say it, because it's kind of a fire moment. But sometimes some of the people that complain don't really know what they're saying about certain situations, and I want to say, what do you think the animals are in prison? Because people think they are.
That's
right.
I
go, well, if they're in prison, the old days, they just slipped the plate of food underneath the door, no human interaction, to the evil people that were murderers, And it's like, my animals are not like that. They have my snakes are the tamest snakes in the world for a reason. They don't have any fear. Because when you're angry person, when you're an angry animal, you have fear. That's why wild animals are dangerous, because their whole life they're trying to escape being killed. And so the wild is not, it's not all roses. The wild is a scary place for an animal, and captivity a lot of times can be a scary place if you don't take care of your animal. And so I think it's real important to take care of your animal. And a lot of people don't see eye to eye with me on this. And I guess it's just like religion. It's just like, government things.
Right.
It's like, you can fight over race, you can fight over whatever. And I just always say, I think it's best that you just enjoy whatever you believe. Do what you do with the conviction that's inside of you, and you're going to be living your dream before you know it. Because
Well said.
it's just, that's where I got to end it with is that yes, animals deserve to be taken good care of, and they're a very important part of our ecosystem, and they need to remain in our ecosystem in the wild, and we need to be considerate of them in every way that we can.
So the name of the show is I Own It. It's about owning every aspect of your life, your behavior, your actions, your thoughts, and owning them. Was there ever a time in your life, you can give a recent example, where you didn't own it fully?
What's really funny is, I think coming from an orphan background, I never blamed anybody for the most part, except myself. And because of that, I do think that the idea of if I was,
Right.
if I needs to go back to the ownership, because you are the, at the end of the day, you're the one that decides. People say, well, I have to do this. There's nothing you have to do. And so when you come to the point where you can realize that instead of having to do it, you just switch it to I want to do it, sometimes the same thing becomes empowering that is holding you back. And so I like that term tremendously. And at the moment, I'm not sure if I have anything except some inner things that I want to try to improve. And it's mostly about taking the opportunity I have and trying to make the most of it, but not in a financial sense. But I have to pay attention to the financial sense, because falls back to that thing I believe, that you have to finance your dreams. And so dreams aren't free. They're only a dream until you put the work in.
That's right.
To make it happen. And so I don't know if I can answer that question just right. Ask me one more time.
Well, here's something interesting. One thing I learned recently is that negative emotions
Yes.
are the things that you avoid of your responsibility. So when you have negative emotions, like a kid throwing a temper tantrum,
Right.
he's avoiding
let's change the subject.
their responsibilities.
Yeah.
And I find that in adults is that when you have a negative emotion, you get triggered, it's because you're avoiding that responsibility. I'll give you an example. So in my company, if I have an employee that triggers a negative emotion, I'm responsible.
Yeah.
That's my responsibility. I hired that person.
Yep.
I trained them. Maybe I didn't train them well enough. Maybe I did.
Right.
But at the end of the day, when I get triggered with a negative emotion, it's because I didn't I'm avoiding the responsibilities I need to do to deal with that situation.
And one of the things for me is I've grown so fast that I have a lot of those situations. And, I'm always told, oh, you're too easy. You got yourself in this situation. And it's true. It's absolutely said it's true.
Right.
100% fact. And so every time in my life that I've grown really fast, I've had to stop. And I always call it going back to clean up the mess. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
it's like boom. It's like, it's like making popcorn, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, it's everywhere. And now I got to go back and put it in a bowl.
Well,
and that's like where I'm in a part in my life where I like literally am sitting here thinking to myself, wow, what's next? And I basically just told you all the things that's going on and I'm trying to figure out a way to take responsibility of all those opportunities. And of course, at the same time, I still live a little bit in the past where I have fear of, making a deal with somebody and they're really just scamming me. You know what I mean? They're trying to take advantage of a situation, or they're trying to, get a contract because they know it's going to be valuable later.
Right.
And I'm trying to move forward with as much balance as I can. And I still think it comes back to that fear that I was talking about in the very beginning. Like you say, the fear triggers you to throw a tantrum. And so for me, I've never been in a situation where I've actually taken a breath to figure things out. And that's something new that I picked up in the last 15 years. I used to just refocus and just move as fast as I can to something else. And so right now I'm in a weird part of my life where I'm just like in a holding pattern, which is not Jay Brewer at any stretch of the imagination, trying to figure this all out.
You know what's interesting about what you said that I've learned is that when you can slow things down and do things right from the get-go,
Yeah,
what ends up happening is you don't have to look back and say, I got to fix this.
right.
If you do it right. So I always advise our audience, take your time, slow down,
Yeah,
think about what you're doing. Because what happens is when you go slower, it's actually you're going faster because you avoid mistakes, you get good quality work
it's
in,
funny, you say this.
build deeper relationships. So everyone's like got to rush forward in life instead of slowing it down. Say, you know what? If I focus on this one task and do it well, I don't have to worry about it.
yeah,
And people always feel like I got to get through this because I got to get on to the next thing because the greed kicks in. And if I move faster, I'll make more money. I'll do this. I'll have better relationships. It's the complete opposite. It's slow.
funny.
It's slow down.
So for me, I would say that I'm 100% in agreement. But the part that you're leaving out of that
Yes,
is this thing called opportunity.
that's true too.
And like for me, I started out as a control freak, working my way out of it as much as I can, because when you come from an orphan background, everything's horrible. What do you want to do? You want to try to protect yourself by controlling your situation, but a lot of times you protect yourself so good that you leave yourself out of a lot of amazing things. And so there's kind of this happy medium. And so I find myself in a situation a little bit out of control even right now, but it's because I took opportunities that were opened at the moment that I knew I was supposed to take, and I wouldn't have any problems because I'd have nothing if I wouldn't have taken those opportunities. So I think that I agree but disagree in some respects, only because sometimes you have to be willing to like take opportunities that maybe come at not the perfect day of the week of the perfect
And
opportunity.
I agree with that. One of the things that
But
ties
as
into
much
is,
as you can possibly do what you're saying,
yeah.
oh my
well,
gosh.
it's
100%.
also think about this. The number one asset we have is time. You can make money
Absolutely.
6 ways a Sunday now in this environment. So if all we have is time, yes, if opportunities come, but if you could focus on those opportunities and maximize your time, then yes, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Pull the trigger, take action, absolutely on opportunities. But also to our audience and everyone out there listening is understand, what are you spending your time on? Because that's all we have.
Boy, we can
So,
waste it really easy.
It's so easy to waste time, especially when you're younger and you're learning about life and business and how to deal with relationships. It's like you gravitate to the things that give you that dopamine hit.
Well, social
And-
media, you
right.
can watch something that's going to make
Exactly.
you better, or you're
Exactly.
going to make something that's just
Right.
spending your time.
Right.
And so there's no better way than you could turn on a great podcast and dig down deep inside yourself and learn something amazing, or you could scroll through 15-second videos of stupid things, and before you know it, it's time to go to bed, and you didn't do anything to prepare for tomorrow.
So I was
And you lost 2 hours of your sleep.
Yes. I was having a conversation with someone. It's great you brought this up. He said, you have a choice, say like at night. Mm-hmm. You're going to go read that book that maybe is going to change your life, give you some knowledge, or are you going to go watch TV where it's just in one ear, out the other? He goes, and people make choices. People want to know, like, why am I not a billionaire? Why am I not a successful commercial real estate investor? Why am I not successful in the reptile zoo business?
Right.
It's focus. It's trying to going after what you want, being persistent. But what ends up happening is that you get in a situation where it's like, what's the easy way out? Your laziness kicks in as a human.
That's natural.
And it's natural. And it's the
can't-
hardest thing. If you can balance that and say, I'm just going to go all in to develop myself and improve and be consistent and become that expert, then you'll have more free time, more availability that you can get lazy on certain things. I think a lot of people forget that if I focus on myself and improve myself, just imagine the doors open, the opportunities, which is what you've done.
When you're in the airplane, they always say, "What? Put your mask on first,
Right.
because then you can help your child, you can help other people."
Exactly.
And there's something to say about that. Like when people are overly focused on what other people are doing wrong, it's usually a fact is they just don't want to look in a mirror.
Exactly.
And if you focus on yourself and you get yourself figured out, you'd be surprised how many people aren't there that you're worried about, because all of a sudden they're not taking up your headspace, and that goes the same way with what you're saying
Right.
in business and in how you do things. Is if you got to clean your whole house, your own house first.
That's right.
And so, I envy having things set up correct from the first point. But sometimes when you get opportunities and things grow really quick, real estate doesn't typically grow really quick.
No.
It's more of a long game. It's a planned game.
It's a marathon business, I
when
say.
When you're doing, for me, starting with zero, and I always tell people, there's time, but I always tell people I started with 2 pennies, I rubbed them together, they turned into 2 nickels, I rubbed them together, they turned them into 2 dimes, I rubbed them together, they turned into 2 quarters, and I almost passed out, and I was rubbing them together, and they were 2 pennies again, and I thought, and that's business, and that's life, it's just ups and downs, and so, but because of it, I've taken risk in places that I've made a lot. I usually don't take risk and lose a lot, because I think a good business deal is breaking even. I consider I was successful. I didn't lose any money.
Right.
Because if you lose money, then you spend the next 6 months just trying to make back what you lost. So even the next 6 months goes well, you didn't go anywhere.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I always used to tell people when they didn't make any money, who cares? Just go for the next deal. Don't lose anything. Before you know it, you'll end up with a profit, and now you've actually gained ground. And so what you're saying about establishing it correctly so you don't have to go backwards is
it's
absolutely
huge.
a game changer
It's
when you
huge.
can do that on any part of your life.
Let me ask something. You are really good at controlling your emotions. You're very good at even keel, looking at a situation.
Yeah.
And really
I cheat.
And digesting it. Are you doing personal development? Like, do you do any personal development?
No, what I honestly have come to the conclusion that there's a creator of the universe out there. He wants nothing but good for us. We get in his way because he gave us this thing called free will. And if we just manage to realize that if a bad thing is happening in your life, it's going to be okay. It's amazing how much different you can look at tomorrow and you can look at today. And if you just spend your whole life worrying about what you didn't have, you'll never see what you do have. And so, some people call things, some people say, I don't believe in God. And I'm like, okay, great. Do you believe in karma? Oh, absolutely. And I just like to say, somebody's keeping track of it. You can name them whatever you want. You know what I mean? Him, her, it. I just happen to believe in God. And so when I've learned that the more I'm able to get outside of my moment and realize that it's going to be okay. You know what I mean? I remember my wife getting pregnant, and she got this book. And the book was pretty much all about all the bad things that can happen. And all she ever thought, oh, this is what's happening. Oh, that. And I think, throw that book away.
Right.
How about instead I'd take her to the mall, and I'd say, there'd be these thousands of people. And I'd say, every one of those was born. Every one of them had a mom
That's
and was
right.
born. We're going to be okay.
That's right.
And so, I feel like life challenges, well, I don't feel like it. Almost every challenge I've ever had in life was the catapult to the biggest thing that ever happened to me good. And it was because I didn't run from it. I just took a deep breath and believed that this thing was going to be something good was going to come out of it, even if I didn't have any clue whatsoever that it possibly could come out. It would come out, and I would develop myself through the trials, through the problems. And at one point in my life, I realized my childhood, though it was far from what you'd want to have. I mean, my dad literally drank himself to death, 2 hours after I told him I'll be shocked if he lived through the night. And he was so drunk, and I thought, I'll be shocked if he lived through the night. And I left, and I came back, sat in a chair like this one, and I heard a thud, and we had roommates, and we were really poor, and went and looked in the bathroom, and he was passed out on the floor dead. And I didn't know he was dead, but in my heart I knew he was dead. Went and walked on the beach. A couple hours later, the police knocked on the door I was at and said, your dad's dead. I'm like, yeah, duh, I know that, And so for me, I had a very tough childhood. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of time, I blamed my childhood for why I emotionally wasn't happy. I was a grumpy person. I wasn't, even though I tried to be happy when I could be happy, still deep down inside was that rotten unhappiness inside of me. And one day I realized after I would never trade one moment of that back, because I can connect the dots where that took me to places that I could never be, doing things I could never ever dream of doing. And so to me, when you're having something rough happening, the settledness in my heart is to know that somehow it's going to be like, ooh, something cool's coming.
Right.
That's this bad, must be something good. And if not, okay, maybe it's my last breath. I'll be okay with that.
Well, there's
too.
always life lessons in whether it's turmoil,
Always.
criticism.
It's whether you want to learn them or not.
Well, it's where you're going to open your eyes and your lens and say, okay, what can I learn from here? So when I feel people are criticizing me, I take a step back and I'm saying, what can I learn from this experience? What can I learn from their words? What's
the
gonna
best people to listen to.
I love when people criticize me, because it helps me grow. When people are kissing my ass and telling me how wonderful,
that makes me frustrated.
It doesn't allow me to grow. So when someone says, hey, you should work on this,
it'll actually shrink you.
Exactly.
Pride, that goes back to my belief system. My belief system is real simple. Pride is, when you're prideful, you quit learning. I'm so dang cool. I'm so great. I know everything. You know what I mean? Well, how are you going to learn?
That's right.
You can learn from somebody. You can learn from a kid that's 10 years old. You know what I mean? And you can learn from somebody older than you. But you can't learn when you think you know everything. So pride is the number one killer in my mind.
I totally agree with you, and I feel that I have trouble gravitating to people that always feel they're always right and don't want to grow.
Oh, I was that guy for years, and I still maybe a little bit.
Right.
But I try, but it's usually just because I haven't centered myself for a moment and said, So I don't usually get in debates. Anymore, but I used to be like want to debate,
I think it's the worst trait to have as an employee is that where I see employees fail at my company, Alliance, is they don't have that open mind.
Right.
They don't listen well. It's my way is the right way.
We all that way.
Right. It's that ego. That ego comes out, and when that ego comes out, what ends up happening is that you don't listen well. You don't respect others. You can't grow because you're not willing to seek the truth in what other people are saying to you. And I find that a lot with employees or outside contractors we work with, that where they fail and there isn't that long-term relationship, and they wonder, like, how come I can't get to the top of the mountain? How come I can't be where you are, Ben? How come we can't grow? It's because it's that mindset that is constantly impacting people.
Sorry.
No worries.
It's on the vibrator.
You're a busy dude. So tell our audience, what's the best way to follow you and engage with you?
Everything I have is Jay Prehistoric Pets. And then my daughter, I put her, I have 3 daughters.
Right.
And one of my daughters has quit working with me, which is, she hasn't really quit working with me. She works quite a bit. And, but she quit working for me like in the capacity she was. And one of my daughters never did work for me. And then my other daughter is working for me and kind of managing. And so I put her in charge of the Reptile Zoo. So the Reptile Zoo is a really fun page, girl-driven, woman-driven, which is kind of cool. You know what I mean? I always like telling social media, like, hey, if you like my stuff, you want to see a woman's version of it, here it is, and she does a great job with that. So it's the Reptile Zoo is actually the name of our company.
Yep.
We have multiple names because we've been doing, we do so many different things, to be honest. But the Reptile Zoo and Jay Prehistoric Pets, and so that comes back from the first name of my business is Prehistoric Pets, which is kind of a fun name.
Yeah, definitely check out a zoo. It's quite an experience for people. I've heard a lot of phenomenal things, and I will definitely be there soon.
I'm always happy.
I just no wrapping snakes around me, my friend.
Oh, it sounds like we have something we need to work on.
Oh, I guess we do.
One of those fears that maybe you need to step
I have a lot of fears when
Who
it
knows
comes to reptiles.
what might be behind this fear that you might conquer one day.
You're right. I'm willing to grow.
You know what? That's really, it's that simple.
Yeah.
If we're willing to face some of the things that we have a little bit of fear of, doesn't necessarily need to be snakes. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But the fear of failure is the number one thing that holds success back.
Exactly. So we're gonna wrap up with our 3 questions. I've been waiting for you to come in studio.
Oh my gosh, you're making me nervous. I couldn't even ask. I never even gave you a clean answer on the last one.
You're the same guy who wraps a snake around him, has a tarantula walking on its hand. And by the way, you can see. I've seen it live last week, but you can see it online. You can see all his videos.
Oh my gosh, go to my Instagram
his
or
YouTube.
Whatever.
It's all. Just type in Jay Brewer and you will have a field day. The problem with you, Jay, is that your videos are so interesting, is that you start losing time that we just talked about because there's
you don't even know how many bets I've got.
I've watched your stuff for like an hour straight, and I'm like, I got to do things like, Jay, what are you doing to me? It's frustrating. All right, so let's start with our 3 questions. So in our studio we have a couch normally, okay? And I would say, Jay, sit down. And I believe you're, 55 years old now?
58.
58.
And that brings me to that subject that you mentioned. That take your time, slow down. Wow, do I wish somebody would have told me, relax, it'll all work out.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I was rampagingly trying to be successful, and I don't think I ever really was going to be until I finally one day realized, relax, it doesn't matter. Right. It's about now. It's about your relationships, and it's not all about the big target out in the future.
Absolutely. So you sit on the couch, say, Jay, lay down, close your eyes. You're 58. You've been through a lot of experiences, a lot of success. People want your attention. Go back to when you were 16 years old. You were an orphan. You had a little bit of a rough background. Knowing what you know now at 58, what would you tell your 16-year-old self to help you become the best version of yourself?
To be honest, it's pretty simple. I would just say, the people that tell you that you can never do it and you will never do it, they don't know who you are. They don't have your dreams.
So believe in yourself.
I just think, not to the point of pride, because there's a big confusion on believing yourself. I'm not the guy that believes that if somebody's going to be told nothing but positivity, they're going to be, because being told non-truths are not healthy.
Right.
You said it already, and I can't tell you how much I agree with that. So I'm not suggesting go tell everybody you're awesome, you're great, but actually speaking like, hey, you're good at this. Hey, you got this. Certain things I think would be the most important thing to me is to believe that the other people are wrong. Thank God that somehow I had a chip on my shoulder, the same chip that it took me forever to turn into something good. I luckily had my little voice, saying, I'll teach them, guy. I'll prove that. But I wish I could have been just told, hey, not everybody's going to agree with you. But the good news is just chase for your dreams, put in 110% and never give up. And I never got that input from anybody in my life. And, it came later a little bit, just because even from people that were my same critics would tell me, they would stand behind me for no apparent reason and then tell me how I'd never make it. But they would stand behind me. And so at least they were telling me what they believed themselves. And what you believe is not necessarily have anything to do with what other people believe. And I think whatever you truly believe you can do, you will do. You just have to believe yourself and not give up no matter what people say, and you don't have to get there tomorrow, because time is in your favor.
Well, Elon Musk said it best. They will criticize and laugh at you, and then they will applaud.
Yeah.
And that's human nature. So in our studio, you can see we have a grand piano, we have drums,
Yep.
we have electric guitars.
Mm-hmm.
If you could have a musician or band come in studio, they could be living or deceased, to play us a song.
Uh-oh.
It's your choice. Who would come into the studio now to play us a song, and what would they play us?
Yeah, that's funny. Wow. I don't know why this song came in my head. I don't know if they're living or deceased. It's a band nobody's gonna ever remember. No, and maybe if you're in Canada, because they were big in Canada. It was a Christian band called Daniel Band.
Okay.
And it was 1987, a concert I went to, and they played this song that said "I'm sorry," and it was basically talking about God, and they had it was rock and roll, which was of the devil,
Right, right.
For all that, somebody trying to control somebody, you know.
Right, sure.
And they had this song that said "I'm sorry," and it was basically apologizing that how much belief they had that there was a God, that He loves us and everything else, to the people who despisingly can't stand people that believe in God. And it's, I just know it's that way. And they're playing they're going from the single, from the 12 string to the
Yeah.
and that would be the band probably.
All right.
And that's just at this moment, that would be the band, and that'd be the song.
Thank you so much for joining us today. What a treat.
Pleasure.
Such a pleasure to see you and hang out and talk, and just you're such a jump for a guy that deals with dangerous animals. You are such a soft, kind-hearted gentleman, and it's just a pleasure to spend time with you. If you are interested in listening to more episodes on the Ben Reinberg I Own It show, kick that right-hand button and click subscribe. Feel free to click the like button as much as you can, because we want great guests like Jay Brewer and all the knowledge he just dropped to go viral all over the world. If you want to follow me, go to benreinberg.com. You can follow me on all different social media platforms, and feel free to go over to our company's website, alliancecgc.com. We just launched the new Alliance Medical Property Fund. If you're interested in investing in commercial real estate passively, feel free to reach out to us. We will teach you how you can build wealth and grow your legacy as well. Jay Brewer, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming today.
Final words for me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Keep living your dream, whatever that is. And if you haven't started, get started and never give up.
Oh, fantastic.
Never.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you for listening to the I Own It podcast with Ben Reinberg. To hear our past episodes and connect with Ben, visit benreinberg.com.